Hello and welcome to another standard video here on the official MTG Arena channel. Today we're taking a look at a very interesting blue-green tempo deck, and it seems unheard of, but we're not actually playing any counter spells. Instead, the plan is to fill the graveyard with lots of instants and sorceries to then cheaply deploy our win conditions. We've got 4 copies of Tolarian Terror, normally a 7 mana 5/5 with Ward 2, but it does get a 1 mana discount for each instant and sorcery card in our graveyard. And then there's the Addymerk Crab from Bloomburrow, 7 mana 5/5 with Flash that gets that same discount, so we can potentially cast it for just double blue. Can flash it in during the opponent's turn, although it will enter tapped, but when the crab enters we can also tap up to 2 target creatures, so this can be great if we play during the opponent's turn to tap down creatures before they get a chance to attack, but we can also use it to tap down blockers, so we can keep getting in there with our 5/5 creatures, and then it doesn't take too many attacks from our 5/5s to close out the game, as it turns out. Now first we need to discount these creatures so we can get them in play, so the early turns will be spent filling the graveyard with our many cantrips and self-mill effects. We've got Sleight of Hand to look at the top 2, put 1 in hand. There's Seed of Hope, which will mill 2 cards at instant speed, gaining 2 life, and then we can put a permanent from among them into our hand, so we can find our lands, creatures, and enchantments. And then we also have Cash Grab, which will mill 4 cards, so it gets to dig a little bit deeper, although no life gain here, but a great way to enable the discount on Tolarian Terror and the Addymerk Crab. And then both of our creatures synergize perfectly with Up the Beanstalk, an enchantment that draws a card when it enters, and whenever we cast a spell with mana value 5 or greater. So even if we cast a 1 mana terror, we'll still get to draw a card of any Beanstalk in play, so that can also quickly add up. And then we've got another enchantment here, Stormchaser's Talent, another potential win condition, making a 1/1 otter token with prowess. Plenty of ways to enable prowess in this deck. Can also level it up to return an instant or sorcery from our graveyard to our hand, and we'll often have lots of choice out of the graveyard. And then at level 3, for those very grindy matchups against more controlling decks, we can also start making additional 1/1 tokens whenever we cast an instant or sorcery spell. And then a Stormchaser's Talent is also perfect alongside This Town Ain't Big Enough. This can be cast for 5 mana, where we get to bounce 2 opposing permanents back, or we can cast it for 2 mana if we target our own permanent as well, so we get to bounce our thing back as well as the opponent's, and then we can maybe bounce our own Stormchaser's Talent, get it back in hand, where we can cheaply redeploy it to make another otter token while triggering prowess, so that can help us go wide. And then This Town Ain't Big Enough is also a 5-drop, even if we cast it with a discount, so another card that can draw Up the Beanstalk. And then we've got a bunch more bounce spells with Into the Floodmaw, also very effective against all the aggro decks in the format that rely on auras or pump spells, as we can just wait for the opponent to commit one of those spells and then bounce their creature in response. And then finally, as you may have noticed, we're only playing 18 lands in this deck, which is very low, but we have lots of ways to find basics early with Bushwhack, and then later if we already have a 5/5 in play, we can now use it as a fight spell as additional removal instead. And then Analyze the Pollen can also find a land early, and later we can collect Evidence 8, ideally exiling creatures and enchantments, leaving the discounts in our graveyard, and then this can find any creature in our deck and put it in hand, so we'll often go for the crab. And then a mana base, also playing 4 copies of Hedge Maze, which gets to surveil when it enters, so it can also help fill the graveyard for us. And then Botanical Sanctum, Anti-Avamaya Coast, maxing out on the dual lands. And then we've got a couple basics, which we can also find with our various sorceries. So yeah, that's our deck. Now let's jump into some games and see how the deck does. Alright, we're on the draw. Our hand's a little clunky. We do have Bushwhack to find a land, and then Sleight of Hand to keep digging. And then double crab in hand already. This feels still pretty weak overall. Alright, this is a little bit better. And then the Talent's not doing a whole lot for me. Would prefer discounting the Tolarian Terror. Start with a Hedge Maze and get rid of the Talents, although against blue-black it's actually not bad, since we can eventually get it to level 3. So maybe I do keep it here. And a bat's gonna have a look. Might go for my only interaction, which is Into the Floodmaw. Yep. I'm not opposed to main-facing Cash Grab, since I don't want this to get countered, since it's important for discounting the terror. And then we'll grab it. So it costs 4 mana. With Seed of Hope we can hopefully reduce that even more. Is our opponent on a blue-black mid-range deck? If they keep up 2 mana, we'll have to play around Phantom Interference, but it's going to be another bet. Might want to take Seed of Hope now to strand double Terror at 4 mana. But it goes for my enchantments. Okay, so step 1, Seed of Hope. Found a land. And then I can Sleight of Hand, play 1 mana Terror. And grab a bounce spell. And then hope they don't have a way to make me sacrifice a creature. Would love to find an Up the Beanstalk to start drawing. Well, there it is. Although their opponent does have 2 mana up. So maybe the play for now is to just keep up into the Floodmaw. Can bounce a bat. And then next turn go Beanstalk plus Terror. Opponent had the Fairy Mastermind, which can also punish cards like Up the Beanstalk. So that's fine. They found a 3rd land. So now they could have a 3 mana counter spell as well, for all we know. Could try and bounce the bat that has Into the Floodmaw underneath, but then they get to replay it. Doesn't seem all that productive. But yeah, end of turn, I guess we still don't do anything. Because bouncing Masterminds, they can just play it again. And then we'll see if Beanstalk resolves, even though Mastermind gets to draw as well. Opponent's got another one. Alright, I guess now we can bounce one of the 2 copies. I guess I'll bounce the one that's untapped. Crab's not bad either. And hit you for 5. Alright, so we're on the board. Crab's a great threat here that we can also play at instant speed. So we don't have to trigger Mastermind in my turn. And another one. Alright, so double crab it is. Opponent tries to remove one of them. And that works. And then before they get a chance to attack, we'll try and tap their stuff down. This town ain't big enough, also excellent. Can potentially bounce our own permanents to give it a discount. We'll start by tapping down the bats. And then I can maybe take the hits, see what they do, and then still cast a cash grab. Which I don't mind if it gets countered, or I can present crab just to have another lethal threat. But we can expect them to have removal for the 5/5. So I kind of like cash grab here. Find another Beanstalk. Sure. Go to attackers. Unless we want a Beanstalk first, but then they would maybe be incentivized to play the Fairy Mastermind first. And they're gonna go for the throats. So now I could bounce my crab and your Deep Cavern Bat, maybe? Trigger Beanstalk. Opponent responds with Mastermind, that's fine, so they get to draw a bunch. But now we finally found some removal. So our opponent still takes 5. And then we probably want to bushwhack while the coast is clear. And plan to play another crab. Can let the Deep Cavern Bat resolve, since we have double crab anyway. Takes one of them. And then before they can attack, we'll attempt to tap stuff down. Opponent counters. Take 3. And then opponent's gonna get to draw off Mastermind anyway, so I'll start here. Plan being to bounce Deep Cavern Bats, get our crab back, and then replay it. And then I can Seed of Hope as well. Could also do this all in upkeep, so they don't get a chance of drawing into another counterspell. But I can wait. Another bat. Okay, so with that on the stack, let's see if this works. And then hope they don't have another counterspell left. And that resolved. Now Deep Cavern Bat resolves. Can still Seed of Hope to gain life potentially. So yeah, the Masterminds did a lot of work. Deep Cavern Bat's been annoying, but up the Beanstalk plus Crab still quite powerful. And we've got a lot of redraws here to try and find more answers. Our opponent going for Beanstalks. Now a Sleight of Hand. And another bat, alright. We're just hoping to Seed of Hope into another crab. Bushwhack would have been nice. So I think we Hedge Maze first to improve my odds of drawing something relevant. Bushwhack's gotta be good enough. Draw into it. And then what do we fight? Opponent will have to probably double jump. So I guess we can start there and then fight afterwards. Maybe start with a Sleight of Hand. Find a crab. And then Bushwhack now. Taking out, I want to say, Mastermind. And then pass with crab available. Can potentially let the bats hit me, and then plan to tap down a blocker. But yeah, just casting the crab will draw me 3 cards. Do have to watch out for sweepers too, potentially, so another reason to maybe wait on playing the crab. Alright, if her opponent's main facing Enduring Curiosity, maybe it's fine to play the crab now. Did they find a Phantom Interference? Or maybe another Mastermind? Alright, that's fine. So our opponent seems dead if we just tap down the 2 Deep Cavern Bats. They only have 1 mana left. We'll have 3 5-powered attackers. And for a single black, they probably can't do anything relevant. Could also tap down Enduring Curiosity. Opponent attacks up to 5. And then they don't get a free chump block. But yeah, either way, we should have it here. And our opponent explodes. Awesome, on to the next one. Okay, we're on the play. Our hand is not exciting, but functional. Hoping to surveil into one of our creatures. Into the Floodmaw, put in the graveyard for now. Also good to fuel Crab and Tolarian Terror. Against red, I wouldn't have minded keeping an extra Floodmaw, but we also need to find a creature for Bushwhack. So we could go Talent into Bushwhack, deal with a Heartfire hero right now. Don't hate that play. While the coast is clear. And then this town in big enough can bounce or Talent back for 2 mana while bouncing an opposing creature. So that's a decent tempo play. For now, just taking 1 potentially. And find another bounce spell. Alright, let's see what's on top. Hedge Maze can go. And hit for 1. Could also level up the Talent first and then bounce it, since there are some spells I wouldn't mind getting back. So we've got options. All these bounce spells should be good against the red deck, and we can wait for them to commit before pulling the trigger. A Lightning Strike going face. Anything else? A Might of the Meek, so now we can respond. Might still wanna cast my more expensive spell here. Also lets us replay the Talon next turn. And our opponent already scoops it up. Alright, on to the next one. Okay, we're on the draw. Hand seems acceptable. Hoping to find some creatures with cash grab. Facing blue-white, is it an Oculus deck? Or is it your more traditional control variant? Looks like Oculus if they're playing Sleight of Hand. So into the Floodmaw, important to bounce their various 3-drops. And then Bushwhack. Good at dealing with cards like Haughty while they're small. Not the best in the face of a 5-5 when our creatures are 5-5s as well. So yeah, this could be a more difficult matchup for sure. At least we found a proactive 1-mana play. Our opponent's likely sitting on the Prankster to mill. Some fine main-phasing cash grab to pump my token. Don't think it's necessarily getting countered. And we have more in hand. Alright, opponent actually counters, that's fine. So they're not setting up their graveyard. And we still added an instant to the graveyard. And our opponent actually taps out for Haughty. That's interesting. So if I cast 3 spells, I can get my token large enough to actually fight with Bushwhack. Problem is, I would have to bounce something with Into the Floodmaw, which would be the Haughty in the first place. So it doesn't quite work out. So what's my play? Could just Seed of Hope and cash grab, and then give them a turn with Haughty. Could still attack, I guess, and then if they block, what do? I guess it's still not going to get large enough to take out the Djinn, and I do need it to be 3 power before I can attempt to fight, so yeah, that's not quite good enough. Yeah, I guess we can attack, and then if they block, I'll just cash grab plus Seed of Hope. Can do that now anyways. Maybe start with the cheaper spell, since there's still maybe a sequence where I can fight. Yeah, I guess Tolarian Terror is still 4 mana here. So yeah, we'll just cash grab. Don't love letting my opponent untap with Haughty, but we've got plenty of bounce spells to deal with it next turn, or we can go Terror plus Bushwhack, although by then it might already be up to 5 power. Opponent's also dealing with triple Adarkar Waste, so the damage from our Otter is actually adding up. They might also be worried about Talent leveling up and getting back a spell from our graveyard. Alright, opponent going for Prankster. Did mill an Oculus, which they might be able to reanimate now. Finds another Prankster. At least they didn't grow the Haughty now, so that's good for us. Prankster again. Now they did mill a Helping Hand, which will get back the Oculus. And then Oculus could also add another instant or sorcery to the graveyard when manifesting, so the Djinn could get to 5 power. Let's hope it doesn't. No point in bouncing something now. Alright, they added a prankster, so not an actual instant or sorcery. So this turn we want to play Tolarian Terror, fight Haughty Djinn, and probably bounce the Oculus. Want to make sure to fight Haughty Djinn before the face down card dies, in case it is an instant or sorcery. And then go ahead and attack, and kind of hoping they block. And then we'll bounce Talents and Oculus. Get you for 3. And our opponent's under quite a bit of pressure, especially with those pain lands. So those might end up making the difference this game. We've got a few more bounce spells available. Our opponent can cast Oculus for 3 mana, but I wouldn't mind. Opponent's going through the graveyard, so it does seem like they're casting the Oculus again. So then our play could just be to empty our hands, bouncing Oculus and one of the 2/2s. And then, yeah, the token will get up to 4 power. So if that's all they have, we should get there. Play Talents, trigger Prowess. This town ain't big enough. And Floodmaw. Yeah, I think this is a pretty tough matchup overall, but we got pretty lucky that they weren't able to grow the Haughty Djinn and that they had triple Adarkar waste to deal with. On to the next one. Alright, we're on the draw. Hand seems keepable. Missing one of our green mill effects to turbocharge the crab. Facing another blue deck with Sleight of Hand. So we'll see if it's a repeat of the Oculus matchup or if our opponent's just mono blue. Analyze, I probably hang on to, since we have plenty of lands as is. Play Hedge Maze. And don't want too many pain lands. Since our deck does end up using colored mana most of the time, we've got lots of 1 mana spells and then crabs double blue most of the time. So Coast can be painful. And yeah, opponent's also blue-green, so this might be the mirror match. This deck still hasn't really seen widespread play, so it is surprising that we're actually playing the mirror. But the deck is very fun to play, so maybe it will catch on soon. Maybe by the time you see this video, the deck's already more popular, since I'm recording this a couple weeks ahead of schedule. So for now, Sleight of Hand. The key card in this matchup is Up the Beanstalk, and there it is. Don't expect too many counter spells. Do we analyze for land? I don't think I do. Although maybe that's greedy, since, yeah, again, we do have double Yavimaya Coast to deal with. And then Up the Beanstalk, also something we can bounce with our 5 mana instant. And it would also trigger Up the Beanstalk as a 5-drop. Alright, so I'm really hoping they're not playing counter spells. Could also wait a turn to play around Phantom Interference in case they're playing that. But they might just go for a cash grab end of turn and pull ahead. So then doing nothing feels bad. Alright, that resolved. They might have a bounce spell that can bounce the enchantment. And found a talent we can play. Opponent actually bouncing the Beanstalk. Pretty aggressive, since we're not close to casting the creatures yet. Our opponent with a 4th instant or sorcery. Analyze, get a land. So they've got 5 cards. So yeah, we could see them cast a 2 mana Tolarian Terror. Opponent passes. Alright, we'll try again with Beanstalk. Trigger Prowess. The crab, they could also play here, so maybe that's what they're setting up. But it does enter tapped, so it's not like they can ambush anything, just tap things down. Alright, do we want to respond here? Maybe this town ain't big enough. Bounce your crab again. Bounce my talent so I can replay it. Draw off Beanstalk. Seems reasonable. And then we'll have to discard to hand size. Maybe a land can go still. We'll probably draw more. And now Analyze can potentially collect evidence, which will help find another crab. Our opponent also found their Beanstalk. So we've got a game. A game that's going to revolve mostly around crabs and terrors. But we do want to discount those down to 1 or 2 mana first. So how do we begin? We know our opponent's going to replay the crab. Yeah, this might be a cash grab turn. Finding crab or terror. Terror being 1 mana is potentially worth it, although currently 2 mana. So if we analyze, then I can play double 1 mana terror. And then analyze, would want to get rid of crab and then 1 more card, but then I'm removing another instant or sorcery, so that's counterproductive. So let's go to attackers, and then maybe I just into the Floodmaw, bounce the crab. Yeah, maybe I just analyze and then double terror anyway. And those have wards, so it's not like the Adimur can tap those down. Yeah, if this matchup is all about bouncing creatures and drawing cards, I guess I would rather have the 1 mana creature that has protection as opposed to the 2 mana one. If there's no counter spells, it's not like the flash ability is all that helpful. So we just want to get on the board. Alright, and then Stormchaser's Talent going to level 3 could also be something we're interested in. So it feels like we're ahead now. And there's Adimurk. And another Beanstalk. So that's scary. Tolarian Terror, draw 2. Yeah, maybe getting Talent to level 3 is how we break the board stall. Opponent main phasing a crab, just so it's untapped. So they are potentially outdrawing us now. An attack's interesting. Yeah, I mean, I could just take it, and then main phase crab in my turn, tapping their things down and attack. Don't know if we can actually attack for lethal with all the prowess. Probably not. But another Beanstalk's nice too. So we certainly have options. So if I want to play crab, I do have to pay the ward to tap this down. And then I would have 2 mana left. So I could play another Beanstalk first. Or we could get the Talent going, just to make an extra threat. It might be Beanstalk still. Although I guess I'm at 15, so I also have to be careful I don't die on the way back myself. So that's also a very real concern. Yeah, so maybe going crab to tap their crabs is still the better play overall. So we'll Beanstalk. Play Talents. And then for now, it's maybe Floodmaw, the Adimurk. And then I can attack with my otter. Don't think the fish gets in there. Can growth otter at instant speed, so our opponent's gonna take the trade. And then I wait until end of turn to cast Adimur Crab to tap their stuff down and try and tempo them out that way. Although we know our opponent can play Crab in my turn to tap 2 things down. So yeah, it's a very interesting matchup. Opponent's got their own talent now. Can at least bounce tokens pretty easily. And I should probably play Crab now. Otherwise they get to attack me for 5 maybe. Another Beanstalk, okay. So 3 mana left. So yeah, assuming they tap down my Crab and an Otter, they're still potentially in danger of dying. Since Tolarian Terror, Fish and Otter with Prowess can get there. So they might need to also have another 1 mana bounce spell. Or a fight spell here, Bushwhack might do it. Opponent lets us untap. So yeah, they need to have Into the Floodmaw alongside Adimur Crab, which means they would bounce an Otter, tap down Otter and Crab, take 6, which is not quite lethal. Is there anything I can do? I can level up talent, get back Analyze, although I don't have an untapped land to then also play the Crab after I get it. So maybe I'm just trying to go wide with another talent. So we're gonna see Adimur Crab. And draw 3 cards. Yeah, sadly cannot Into the Floodmaw my own Crab, but I can this town in big enough my Adimur. So we are attacking for lethal. Opponent will need the bounce spell as well. Which I imagine they have. Yep. So that happens. And then probably just play tap land pass. The plan being to bounce my own Crab and their token, and then by playing the Crab I can tap down their 2 copies. Seed of Hope gaining life. Could maybe change things slightly. Another talent. Can bounce the tokens easily, so that's not a problem. And our opponent levels up, okay. Getting the bounce spell back, I imagine. So a town in big enough. What happens if they bounce my Crab? Does this have 2 separate targets? It does, so yeah, bouncing my Crab is not gonna stop their token getting bounced. Play it. And our opponent explodes. Yeah, there's just too much for them to deal with. And yeah, that was a very interesting mirror match. Despite our opponent eventually having more Beanstalks, the early pressure just ended up making the difference. Awesome. So 4 wins in a row for the blue-green tempo deck. And yeah, this seems like a pretty well-positioned deck if you're expecting a lot of aura strategies, since bounce spells are almost as effective as just removing their creatures for good. And then, as you can see, once you start chaining together Beanstalks and then 1 mana Terrors and 2 mana Crabs, it can snowball very quickly, and then just backing up your creatures with bounce spells is good enough. You don't need to destroy anything if you can just get in for 5 damage repeatedly. Sweet, so yeah, that's gonna do it for today's gameplay. Wanna thank you for watching, hope you enjoyed, and as always, Have a nice day.